Hello there, everyone. If you're watching this video, then you are part of the TTOR army, an army that is building itself up one subscriber at a time. Now, before we get into the topic of today's video today, I'd like to talk to you about a little something that you really ought to be using, and that something is called Quarter. Quarter is an open source alt tech alternative to YouTube as well as other lying grifter video sharing sites in the alt tech world. And Quarter has a lot of reasons why you should be using it. For one, the features and functionality of Quarter are on par with what you would expect from YouTube. You have full HD video upload capacity, including 4K uploads. You have live streaming. You have free restreaming to basically any streaming site on the internet, which is something that YouTube and other video sites and restreaming sites even don't give you, at least not without a paywall. There's also public playlists, easy to use comment moderation system, and there's also features that you don't see on YouTube, such as Quarter Bucks, which is an insight currency that you earn by getting views on your uploads, and then you can use that currency to promote your whole channel or individual videos on the main page of the site. And there's also video chat rooms where you can do video calls and video chats with friends, family, coworkers, your followers and fans, etc. And you can live stream those chat rooms to your channel. So there's more than one way to live stream to Quarter. And in addition to all the awesome features and functionality and the fact that Quarter is built on an open source video site script, Quarter champions freedom of speech. When you read the terms of service, you'll come to realize that you can basically say and do anything you want on Quarter as long as it doesn't violate the laws of the land. So with that in mind, if you're looking for a new video sharing site, an alternative to YouTube that is feature rich and functional and champions freedom of speech in practice and not just word, then Quarter is the site for you. Now that we have that out of the way, let's talk about the subject of today's video, which is the atheist community on the internet, specifically the one on YouTube. Especially the ones who comment on my videos and basically tell me how stupid I am and how dishonest I am and how I'm just this horrible loser who doesn't know anything about anything, and they're the bastions and champions of logic, reason, rationality, and they accept the observable evidence that they see in reality, and blah 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 blah. Of course, when you actually analyze the atheist YouTube community as a whole, what you realize is that they're not any of the things they claim to be, and more often than not, they happen to be the very things they accuse Christians and young earth creationists like me of being. But I don't need to give you that in-depth analysis because one atheist actually has done the work for me. An atheist has actually done the Christian apologetics community a favor by writing an article on Medium that actually analyzes the atheist YouTube/internet community as a whole and exposes them for the fools that they are. The article in question was written by Godless Girl. Godless Girl is an atheist content creator that runs in basically the same circles as Brett Keane. I encountered her actually a few years ago through Brett Keane, and every now and then I'll actually hear from her, and we've talked about doing collabs before, but she has never actually followed through with that so far. I don't know why, but it is what it is. But Godless Girl is one of the few atheists I actually respect because, one, she's willing to acknowledge that there's a burden of proof that is on atheism, which is something that atheists don't like to admit. They don't like having the burden of proof on them and applied to their worldview, so they'll do everything in their power to avoid ever having a burden of proof. Godless Girl has been willing to call them out over that, but now in her recent article on Medium titled, "You Are a Stupid and Dishonest Atheist If What I Say Triggers You," well, she really lets the atheist YouTube and internet community have it. Let's read what Godless Girl had to say. Aaron Raw and Matt Dillahunty are arrogant, angry atheists who lose half of their debates with Christian apologists. We all construct our own truth. It's our way of getting through life. Once a lie is repeated and repeated, the real truth is suppressed and our constructed truth becomes what we think is reality. That is true, Godless Girl. I would say that is very much true when it comes to people justifying their rejection of God. But let's keep reading because this is where she really starts to let the atheist community have it. Here are some signs that you might be intellectually dishonest when it comes to the question of God. Number 1, you only watch what you already agree with. You deliberately stay away from anything that might challenge your existing worldview. You do this simply to confirm your own prejudices. You deliberately stay away from anything that might challenge you. You start to unfollow people who post things on Twitter and Facebook that you disagree with. This is telling. When we truly feel comfortable with what we believe, we can happily imbibe contrasting or conflicting views. If you're so sure you're right, then why do you shy away? There's a chance that you're strengthening the foundations of a belief that you've built upon the sand. And this is absolutely true. When you go to the comment sections of atheist YouTube videos on their channels, what you basically find is a giant circle-jerking echo chamber where there's almost no dissent at all to the content, and they're all basically giving each other high fives and pats on the back and affirming each other, telling them how great they are, and oh, you really showed those Christians and young earth creationists in this video. And basically they just keep affirming themselves and there's no real dissent even when there should be. Whereas you go to content like mine and basically all you get is dissent. I mean, every now and then I'll have a Christian or young earth creationist comment on my content saying how good a job I did, but more often than not I got atheists and evolutionists coming onto my channel telling me what a loser I am and how I'm wrong and blah 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 blah. And some of the stuff that you'll see later in this article. And yeah, that's what I get. So yeah, atheists on the internet generally do only watch what they already agree with, and they stay away from stuff that might challenge their existing worldview. And if they do, they'll only go on to dissenting content long enough to say their comments, but they don't actually watch your content all the way through or give serious critiques or questions about it. More often than not, they don't do this. Now, obviously, someone like me doesn't fall into the category of number 1 because I often make video responses to the content that atheists and evolutionists put out. And in order to make those responses, I actually have to look at that dissenting content that challenges my existing worldview. So obviously, number 1 is not an issue for me. But let's read number 2. People who disagree with me are stupid. We use extreme words like stupid or irrational to distance ourselves from the challenge and wrap ourselves in protective labels. That's why you don't read or watch anything Christian. They're so obviously deluded, but it's not that, is it? Psychologically, you newbie atheists don't want to be challenged by something. You need to convince yourself that it is ridiculous. We need to alienate it and dispose of it. So we start using extreme words like stupid or irrational, which help us distance ourselves from the challenge. This is where terms like Magic Sky Daddy come from. By reducing Christianity ad absurdum, we don't need to worry about its potential truth. You wrap yourselves in protective labels. And this is absolutely true. I have lost count of all the atheists who've come onto my video comment sections over the years to tell me how stupid and irrational I am for daring to dissent from their worldview or expose their worldview for being wrong about really anything. And the reason is because they don't like being challenged. They don't like having their boat rocked. They don't like having to consider the possibility that their atheistic worldview is wrong. And so what they do is what Godless described. They call people like me stupid and irrational, and they make up terms like Magic Sky Daddy, and basically they make claims about Christians and Christianity that Christians and Christianity never have and never will make, and they reduce Christianity ad absurdum in order to protect themselves. It's all a defense mechanism by atheists and evolutionists in order to avoid having to deal with the fact that the worldview they adhere to so strongly has fatal flaws with it. Now, let's move on to number 3. You use words like rational and logical to describe yourself, but they don't actually prove you to be any of those things. These words are like verbal placebos. They create a pleasant feeling of security in us without actually proving us to be any of those things. However, calling yourself logical and rational doesn't somehow magically transform all your ideas into logical, rational ideas. You are the opposite of a free thinker. And this is absolutely true too. I see atheists and evolutionists all the time, whether in the comment section of my videos or in their own content, describe themselves as rational and logical, but then they say and do things that are the opposite of rational and logical, and when I dare to expose those things, suddenly I'm the bad guy. So yeah, atheists and evolutionists are definitely not free thinkers, generally speaking. Especially when you look at the people who follow guys like Apologia and Vice Rhino and Shannon Q and Professor Stick and the rest. They're all complete sheeple. All of these people, to one extent or another, even the content creators they follow, are sheeple, who are not rational, logical, free thinkers. They are subservient to whatever ruling authorities have to say. Because if you look at the worldview they claim to hold, the atheistic evolutionary worldview, that worldview is literally the state-promoted worldview. It is the state-promoted religion that is masquerading as science. When you believe in atheistic evolution, you're really believing what the government is telling you to believe. You're believing what the authority figures in the academic and scientific world are telling you to believe. In other words, you're just on the bandwagon. You're just going around with the majority opinion. That doesn't take a free thinker to do that. Any idiot can go along with the majority opinion or the politically correct narrative. A true free thinker can dissent from all of that. A true free thinker who is rational and logical can disprove those things if they have fatal flaws. And this is why I do what I do. The atheistic evolutionary worldview has fatal flaws in it that prevent it from being true and basically take whatever evidence in science the atheists think supports their worldview and renders it moot and useless and not true. But free thinkers like me, well, we're just too problematic, and so we have to be demonized and disregarded. Number 4. You get angry with those who disagree. You swear at or shout down people in conversation or walk away from a discussion. You convince yourself that your anger is righteous at how immoral their viewpoint is, but is that really true? Anger is what happens when we don't feel in control and try to re-exert our own power in a situation. Think of any scenario where you've lost your temper and you'll see it follows that process. It's an emotional response, not an intellectual one. It's a sign that you're out of your depth, that you don't know everything. People sure of what they believe and confident of its truthfulness tend to remain calm in conversation. I get angry because they're stupid, you might say. And yes, I have been on the receiving end of this too, and not just with atheists and evolutionists, also with older creationists. Man, you start to expose how fatally flawed their worldview is, or you point out how they're wrong in a claim or argument they're making about you, and they'll swear at you, they'll shout you down, they'll turn into an irrational wild animal when they're cornered. So this part is definitely true. Although I'm not sure I agree with Godless about anger always happening when we don't feel in control, because sometimes you get angry when you see something that's truly evil, truly immoral, or truly hypocritical and double-minded. I know that happens to me. When I come across someone who's incredibly hypocritical and double-minded and practices double standards, I experience anger in those scenarios. But it doesn't mean that I'm out of control or that I don't know everything, because sometimes you get angry at someone who is lying to people, especially if there's someone who should know better. That's why I get angry at older creationists like William Lane Craig when they teach Christians to reinterpret the Bible, because William Lane Craig himself has acknowledged that we shouldn't be reinterpreting the Bible in light of anyone or anything else, but then he has gone on to do exactly that to justify his older creationism beliefs, And then in more recent years, he's admitted that that's exactly what he does and will do if he ever feels like the Bible has been proven wrong on something by the scientific and academic community. I get angry at people like him because he literally knows better in regard to the biblical worldview, and yet he does what he does anyway, even though he knows it's wrong, even though he knows he's not supposed to do it. Something like that makes me angry, and I think my anger is justified in that scenario. Not sure what Godless thinks about that, but I think anger in that scenario is justified. Number 5. You quote famous atheists without being able to back up their arguments. The problem with this is that you find it much more difficult to build on those sound bites when pushed. You think that moronic atheists like Richard Dawkins, Aaron Ra, and Matt Dillahunty are gods. You simply quote something that one of your heroes has said. The problem is that you find it much more difficult to build on those sound bites when pushed. An example of this would be, you're an atheist when it comes to Zeus. Atheists just go one god further. How would you respond when informed that this is a joke, not an argument? What's your follow-up argument? See what I mean? A quote from an atheist is not in itself an argument for atheism. We need to be careful that emotive, persuasive language doesn't replace actual argumentation. And that is so true. I have seen many an atheist throw memes at me that show a picture of an atheist, and it'll have a quote from that atheist that basically amounts to a joke or a non-argument or a non-sequitur or whatever, and it doesn't really prove anything. And then when I press the person who shared that meme, they can't ever defend it in any real detail or with any real integrity. So, point number 5 is definitely true. But Godless continues. The reasons most people give for rejecting Jesus are almost never as rational and well thought out as they think, but instead a sort of advertising slogan for their desires. This is absolutely true, Godless. This is why a couple of months ago I made a video calling out Apologia for denying the existence of sin in order to avoid accountability for sin. The reason why I did it is because the first thing to go when you deny the existence of sin is accountability for sin. Obviously, Apologia desires to not be held accountable for his sins. So in order to get around that, he denies the existence of sin as well as the existence of God, because by denying both God and the existence of sin, accountability for sin goes away. And people like Apologia and his followers can insist that this is not why they do it, but come on, man, we can all see it. I mean, think about how convenient it is if sin doesn't exist as a consequence of God not existing. That means you can behave in all of the ways that the Bible condemns, and there will be no accountability for it. There's no one who's going to hold you accountable for violating the commands of the Bible and violating the things that the Bible defines as sin. There's no accountability for that if there is no God and there is no sin. I mean, it's a great convenience. It's way too convenient. I think that's the underlying desires, that Apologia and other atheists who deny the existence of God and the existence of sin, and they condemn the parts of the Bible where God holds people accountable for their sin, such as the pre-flood world of Noah and the Canaanites, etc. They do all this because accountability for sin is something that they detest. And this is why, at their core, they deny God's existence and the existence of sin. It comes from their desire to avoid accountability for sin. Whether they want to publicly acknowledge that, or whether they don't even realize that this is what they're really doing. Anyway, Godless concludes, how we feel is not always a good gauge of truth. The truth doesn't always underwrite our feelings, but often wounds them. How will you deal with that? What do you want? Your truth or the truth? You know, when you read this article, you could almost come to the conclusion that Godless Girl is a Christian in disguise, because she basically argues just like a good Christian apologist would when exposing the YouTube atheist community and the atheist internet community in general. And it's interesting to see an atheist appeal to the truth, as if there is an objective truth that exists outside of the human mind. It's interesting to see her say something like that Because one of the logical consequences of atheism is that if it's true, then something like objective truth doesn't exist. What's objectively true is, in your mind at that point, is really just a subjective truth. If there is no God, then there is no mind outside the human mind to set objective truth. And therefore, truth becomes whatever you define it to mean. It's dependent on, the individual or the society that you're in. Or it's up to a majority vote of the globe at the most, high scale scenario. But there is no such thing as the truth or objective truth if atheism is true. And so it makes me wonder about Godless Girl. She identifies as an atheist now, as an atheist publicly, but is she really an atheist deep down inside? Makes you wonder. But no, I really liked this Medium article that Godless Girl did. It does a masterful job of exposing the irrationality and the hypocrisy and the double standards and just the sheer stupidity of the YouTube atheist community as well as the atheist internet community in general. And I get that not every atheist on the planet is like the internet atheist community or the YouTube atheist community. But when you look at the internet, you have all these idiots running around representing atheism. Makes atheism look bad. But I'm not someone who judges atheism by the behavior of its adherents on YouTube and the internet. I judge it by what its actual tenets are. I judge it by what its actual paradigm of history teaches. And there are plenty of flaws with the atheistic evolutionary paradigm of history that prevent me from believing it and that cause me to reject any sort of scientific claim that allegedly supports the truthfulness of the atheistic evolutionary paradigm of history. My hope and prayer for Godless Girl not only is that we can collab in the future, because I think it would be fun to do some kind of collaboration where we talk about these things, but I also hope that she will eventually leave atheism behind and accept the biblical worldview and find a saving personal relationship with Jesus. I hope that she does that if she hasn't done it already. And with that, I bid you guys adieu. And if you really want to check out Godless Girl and the kind of things that she does content-wise, I would encourage you to go to her channel, which you can see right here on screen. And I'll go ahead and put a link to her channel in the description box below. Thank you for watching and have an excellent day.